Thank you for joining me today for Real Estate Religion and You. My name is Dr. Sylvia Black, licensed real estate broker with 43 homes and apartments, and I'm licensed to preach and ordained as a minister, and I have my PhD in Sacred Biblical Studies, and I'd like to thank you for joining me today. Today we're going to talk to you again from my book, Valley of Dry Bones, Live Again, which is found on barnesandnobles.com, Amazon Kindle, and at a bookstore near you. Also, be an ebook and soon to be on audio as well as in video, on video book. A video book and an audio book narrated by me. Okay, and we're going to continue with chapter 3, which talks about failure is not fatal. Okay. Now again, the vision of the Valley of Dry Bones symbolized the whole house of Israel that was then in captivity. Like unburied skeletons, the people were in a state of living death, pining away with no end to their judgment in sight. We can, with the help of God, rebuild our walls of our lives from the rubble that has been created out of the mess we've made and into sturdy walls of peace. Faith, hope, conviction, trust, and confidence, belief, expectation, and so much more. Resurrection power is the power to cancel our past, our failures, our mistakes, our sins, our regrets that we all have, and because we've all made mistakes in our lives, but don't beat yourself up about them anymore. Allow God to love you and forgive you for what you've done, then we can learn to love ourselves again. The time of Babylonian rule was relatively brief, as were the changes in society, religion, and religious ritual instituted by the people remaining in Judah. After 2 generations of Babylonian exile, the time for redemption had arrived. Resurrection power means to live again. God will restore hope and confidence in us, and He will give us courage and faith where there was once despair, anguish, and desolation. Okay, and again, I'm talking to you from my book, Valley of Dry Bones, Live Again, and I am the author of this book. You can find it on Barnes & Nobles, as well as Amazon Kindle, and other social media websites, and at a bookstore near you. Okay, now to continue from where we left off at, I had read you 2 Corinthians 4, 6 through 12. Now the enemy will try everything they can, including intruding on our imagination, hopes, and dreams, to get us to turn our back on our God. And today's topic is failure is not fatal. Part 3. One little mistake and the enemy is rejoicing because they believe that they have succeeded in destroying a child of God. But it's up to us whether we, as believers in Christ, are going to allow anyone to turn our hearts and minds away from God. Choosing to serve God is a choice. Okay, God doesn't impose His will upon any one of us. We choose to serve Him, just like we choose who and what we are going to believe in and trust in. I trust God. What about you? Some people's failure will result in them fighting those who love them, as those who have done them no wrong, and send them blubbering off in another direction when in fact they have done nothing wrong. Some people lack proper discipline and leadership and direction, resulting in poor discipline. Discipline starts at home and or with a made-up mind. We must be in control of our emotions and feelings, especially when failure comes. We make up our minds how far we will go when we face disappointments. We must stay in control of our emotions and our thoughts. We must make up our minds who we are going to serve no matter what comes our way. Decide to restrain yourself from sin when failure comes. The devil's spirit is strong, but the devil's power cannot stand against the power of God. Some people stay in a rut that they've been placed in and do not seek to better themselves or prepare themselves for any other battles that may come their way. And there will be many battles that will come to face as a follower of Jesus Christ. If you lay down and die, thereby giving up on yourselves, then you've already been defeated. Somebody just forgot to do the autopsy. They live in past regrets instead of looking to the hills from which cometh their help, because all of our help comes from the Lord. Remember, we are going to be distressed, anxious, edged in every way. You may feel hedged in, but we are not trampled or defeated. We will be bamboozled, baffled, and even confused and unsure of finding a way out of our situation. God leads us and guides us along the way. We will never be driven to desolation, hopelessness, or gloom. We will be frightened, unsettled, or even in a panic, stricken and persecuted. We will never be deserted or left alone by God. God said he will never leave us nor forsake us. We will be struck down, but we will never be destroyed, demolished, or damaged to the point of ruin. We will always carry around in the body of dying of Jesus, so that Jesus' resurrection life will also be seen in our bodies. Our flesh may be dying, but our spirit is being renewed day by day, and it lives just like Jesus lives. Our dying bodies will be resurrected back to health, and our finances restored back to wealth, and live again and become a great army. Just like Jesus was resurrected from the dead to live, and he lives. Those who serve him will also live and have abundant life. Those who serve, love, and trust him will have a chance at eternal salvation as opposed to eternal damnation. For we will live and constantly experience the threat of being handed over to death for Jesus' sake, so that Jesus' resurrection from dead to life will be an example of Jesus' resurrection demonstrated in our earthly bodies, which are always at the brink of death. It may look like our bodies are dying to a non-believer, but our spirit lives, and lives more abundantly. It may look like we have failed at every effort for success. It may look like there's no hope of ever recovering lost health or rising up out of that sick bed of affliction. We have the same spirit of resurrection that Jesus had. Therefore, we will know that he who raised the Lord Jesus from death to life will also raise us with Jesus from our dead situation and circumstance back to life, and we will be a great army. Exodus 15:26 Amplified Version says, saying, if you will diligently listen and pay attention to the voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in his sight, and listen to his commandments, and keep foremost in your thoughts and actively obey all his precepts and statutes, that I will not put on you any of these diseases which I have put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. Okay, now part one, I believe I talked about the one of the biblical characters, who was Joseph, who appeared like he had failed. Okay, and here's a couple more biblical characters that I want to bring an example to you to let you know that failure is not fatal. Now Elijah had so many miraculous experience that you think that he had unshakable faith. Okay, after all, he caused the rain to stop for more than 3 years. 1 Kings 17:1. Was fed by ravens. Oh yeah, that was the character. Elijah was the one who ran for his life. Remember, he was somebody threatened him and to kill him, and he just wanted to die and go to heaven. And all he had to do was rest and get something to eat. And he was fed by ravens at that time when that happened. 1 Kings 17:4. You can find that story in the book of Kings. He saw a limitless jar of flour and a jug of oil. 1 Kings 17:4 again. That's when he witnessed the widow's son resurrected. 1 Kings 17:22. And beat the prophets of Baal by calling down fire from heaven. 1 Kings 18:38. But when the showdown with the Baal worshippers so angered King Ahab and his wife Jezebel that she vowed to see him dead. Okay, Elijah couldn't take it. The pressure of being such a high-profile prophet of God had gotten to Elijah, and he hightailed it into the wilderness. He ran for his life, baby. Like so many of us, we run instead of staying, in the situation. Sometimes it's better to run, because if you stay in the situation, we have more diligent, more ambitious fights to fight. It's like, when people say things to you, or they, or whatever, or things happen, it's like, I don't want to say nothing to that person. I don't want to get involved in that. That's not something that I want to fight. I have bigger battles to fight. You know what I mean? Something that's going to benefit me. If you argue with a fool, you're definitely not going to get nowhere. You know what I'm saying? But when God met him there in the wilderness, when God met Elijah in the wilderness, Elijah was undone. He was like, he had it. That's it. I'm done. I can't take it no more. Just take him up to heaven. So he wanted to just go up to heaven right then and there. Feeling like he was the only prophet left, he was confident that he was completely isolated and imperiled, and that he failed. How do you imagine God responded to Elijah? Well, he fed Elijah, allowing him to rest for a time. Every time he slept, he said, get up. Fed him. Go back to sleep. Get up. Fed him. Go back to sleep. Get up. Fed him. And he finally answered Elijah's complaints, and he encouraged Elijah with a still small voice that he was not alone. 1 Kings 19. Okay, burnout is only permanent if you allow it to be permanent. Okay, don't listen to everything that you're tempted to believe in when you're exhausted. Okay, take time to get some rest. Get a nice decent meal in your body. You know what I mean? Eat your favorite dessert if you have to. Enjoy your food. Set a nice table before yourself. You know what I mean? And just enjoy. Have a feast, have a banquet, have a Thanksgiving dinner. Cook it all up. You know what I mean? And just, enjoy your food, and then sit back and relax and do what it is that you enjoy doing the most. And then get up with your bad self and go on. Physically, he thought that he was, we have to take care of ourselves physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And then we can get back to doing the things that we love to do. Now, another character, John Mark. Remember how John Mark was deserted? How many of y'all ever felt deserted in your life? Okay? John Mark's family was an important group of people in the early church. When Peter was miraculously released from prison, he knows that the believers will be gathered at home at John Mark's family. Acts 12:11-13. Due to his family's significance in the movement and relationship to Barnabas, Paul and Barnabas picked John Mark up on the way back from the mission trip to Jerusalem to take him with them to Antioch. Acts 12:25. From there, Paul and Barnabas are set to Syria, bringing John Mark along with them as an assistant. Acts 13:1-5. But somewhere along the way, John Mark decides that he had enough after sailing the Perga. Acts tells us, matter-of-factly, that John left them there and returned to Jerusalem. Verse 13. Essentially, he quit when the going got rough. How many of y'all feel like you quit when the going get rough? Maybe that's why you feel like you fail, because you give up too soon. Okay, now we don't know why John abandoned them, John Mark. Okay, but we know that it wasn't an honorable decision. Okay, when Barnabas later suggested Paul that they go back to get John Mark, Paul refuses. Such a strong disagreement arises between the two that Barnabas and Paul now separate. These two men who had been on a multitude of mission trips together are so divided over young John Mark. It was pathetic. Okay, and it indicated that they will no longer be together. Acts 15:36-41. Now, many years later, when Paul is sitting in prison awaiting trial, you'll remember that, he writes a letter to the church at Colossae. He not only tells them that John Mark is with them and has been a great comfort, but he also tells them that they're to welcome John Mark if he shows up. This kid that had sorely disappointed Paul had now become a man who brought him comfort. At one time, John Mark was a personality that caused division in the body, but now Paul is proudly calling him a follower, a fellow worker. Colossians 4:10-11. Okay, we all develop gradually. Little by little we develop. Physically as well as spiritually. Failure isn't always a sign that we can't cut it. That you don't have what it takes. It may not have even been your fault. You may be overqualified for the job. You may know more than them. You may be better at it than they are. Whatever it is that you're doing. So, and then they want to make you feel like you're a failure because you're so good at it that they're scared of losing what they got. Okay, but the reality is that they're the ones that are the failures. You're not. And failure is not you, who you are. Failure is a situation, a circumstance. It's not a person. You're not a failure. Failure is what happened to you. Okay. Now we all develop gradually. Failure, like I said. Now we can always outgrow, these kinds of feelings that we fail. But sometimes, like with me, when people tell me you ain't got what it takes or whatever, or something wrong with you, or whatever, or I feel like I'm not accomplishing what it is that I'm setting out to do, that gives me ammunition, baby. That fuels me. That puts more gas in my tank, baby, to say, hey, you know what? I just learned 100 ways that you said no. Now I'm going to try 101. I know not to go to next time when I miss it. Yeah, when somebody talk to me. Now we're going to talk about King David. Y'all remember King David, right? King David, who was King David committed one of the biggest sins against God that you can ever imagine. He was guilty of premeditated murder in the first degree, if you really think about it. Okay, he was guilty of adultery, lust, and greed. Okay, and he didn't think twice about his actions. But when his firstborn son died, he turned his life around and became a changed man. He dedicated the rest of his life to God, and then God promised him that your generations and 1,000 generations to come will be blessed. Okay, David fought Goliath and won, remember, and when he was a kid. He overcame his brother's insinuations and jealousies. Okay, there's no question that David is one of the Bible's most important figures. It's easy to be inspired by his youthful willingness to fight Goliath, a 9-foot giant, who called him, he says, "Well, am I a dog that you come out me with a stick?" Remember? Okay, and his tender friendship with Jonathan, his worshipfulness psalms, all of the wonderful poetry he wrote in the Bible and in the book of Psalms, and and his enduring patience under wicked King Saul. Okay, remember David defeated 1,000. Saul defeated 1,000, and David defeated 10,000. And Saul got angry and wanted to kill David, and David had to run for his life. David tried to dance in front of Saul to try to take away his wanting to kill David. Okay, David was a poetic man. He was very emotional. He was poetic, and he loved the Lord. If you look in the book of Psalms, you'll find that before every battle, he went before the Lord and he talked about how his enemy was coming against him, how the enemy wanted to kill him, and whatnot. And then after he had a victory, he would talk about the victory that he had in the book of Psalms. The Psalms is a great, and that will get you into the habit of it gets me into the habit. I'm in the habit of actually going to the Lord for everything, giving him credit for everything, and thanking him for everything, and just relying entirely on him now for everything instead of my own intuitions. Now, it's almost hard to fathom that the beloved character who spoke so highly of in more than half of the Bible books would also be guilty of breaking half of God's commandments. Isn't that amazing? See, failure is not fatal, baby. You can sin, and whatnot, and do wrong, and then you feel that you are unworthy of God's love. Okay, but look at David. David was, a man who had a whole lot going for him for a long time. He had courage enough that, he was sheep man. He was doing the sheep dung, whatever. He had to shovel sheep dung for a living. It's like changing cat litter or changing, scooping up dog poop all day long, That's what he had to do, And remember when the prophet came around and he wanted to anoint the next king? Okay, he looked at all his strong, handsome, tall, courageous brothers, and none of them were the one to be anointed. And isn't that amazing? They looked like they should have been the ones to be anointed, but they wasn't. And he says, "Don't you have any more sons?" He says, "Yes, I have another one that's out there shoveling sheep dung." And he brought him in here and he says, "He's it. David, you are anointed. You will be the next king of Israel." Isn't that so? You don't even have to look like you're going to be a king, You don't even have to act like you could sin. I'm not saying go out and sin, but you could have done wrong. But now is the time to turn your life around and let God know that you are sorry for what you've done, and ask him and beg him if you have to, give you another chance. Give you another chance to get it right. And make some promises, make some decisions, change your life around. Do it differently now. Get all of that vermin and that garbage out of your system and stop thinking in the gutter. And then your life will start to change and you'll start to experience a metamorphosis like David did. Now, where you can find that at is David coveted Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, found in 2 Samuel 11, 2-3. He committed adultery with her, 2 Samuel 11, 4. Effectively stealing her from Uriah, 2 Samuel 12, 9. Lying to Uriah, 2 Samuel 11, 12, 13. And eventually planning and actually having Uriah murdered. Because Uriah was so loyal and faithful to David that he did not want to go home and sleep with his wife. See, if Uriah had went home and slept with his wife that night, then it would have been possible that, because I don't think they didn't have no, paternity test back then, she would have got pregnant and whatnot. And she was pregnant from her and David. But then there would have been strife all along anyway, I know, because it would have been David's child, you know, and that's not going to take his affection away from Bathsheba just because Uriah slept with her one night. You know, that would just cleared him for that adulterous act, okay? And the prophet had to come around and tell David, you are that man, okay? You are the man that's guilty. You know, sometimes you can't even see it. You got to have somebody else to tell you. You know, now when the prophet Nathan, that's what I'm talking about, confronts David for his depravity, you know, let me give you his corruption, his wickedness, his evil, his decadence, David immediately repents. Okay? David immediately repents. He confesses his sin to God. And when the son is born, and we know what happened to that. He gets sick and he dies. David fasts and prays and mourns and asks God to let him live. In essence, God was saying, somebody's going to pay for your sin, David. You may have turned your life around, but you are going to understand that it don't pay to sin. And he died. When he died, David got up, stopped crying. He says, you may not be able to come back to me, but someday in that great by and by, I'm coming to you. And that's encouragement for anyone who has experienced someone in the family or someone close to you who has died. Okay? Now, it all depends on how y'all live your life, though. But they may not be able to come back to you. But someday in that great by and by, you may see them again. Okay, and I hope that's a little bit of an encouragement for some people who, you know, because there's a couple of, you know, both elders in my family that have passed on. That, you know, she used to sing a song to me, my Aunt Nana, she used to sing, till we meet again, till we meet again, God be with you till we meet again. Okay, so, and that was encouraging. So I think of that song when I think of her, because I know that in that great by and by, I will see her again. Now, when we have sinned, we must recognize it. You know, we recognize it as sin. You know, and repent of our sins to God. You know, God's forgiveness doesn't save us necessarily from the consequences of our conduct, like I said. But if we've abandoned the behavior and are willing to accept the consequences, God can still use us and move us into our next level of anointing and into our divine and perfect future. Today, King David's behavior would have been classified as, like I said, premeditated murder, adultery, just to name a few. There was other crimes that he committed within the crime itself. Okay, the man would have probably got the death chamber. Okay, if not, he would have been life in prison. Okay, now when King David's child died, that was a turning point in the life that he devoted himself to God wholeheartedly from that point on. Okay, simple as that. You know, some people have to have a tragedy happen in their lives before they turn their life around. Now, you know the story of Paul, right? Paul destroyed many of the walls of many people's lives. All because he was good at what he did. He just did that. He thought that Jesus was dead. And they thought that they could do anything they wanted to do, you know. But on his way to Damascus one day to persecute some Christians, he met with Jesus Christ in person. He met with God himself in person. And he stumbled and fell and got up and he still couldn't see. And God said, why do you persecute me? And Paul knew God by his name. And the person that was afraid of Paul, or the one that Paul was getting ready to destroy, was sent to heal Paul from his blindness. Paul fell down on his knees, and his eyes were blinded. When he got up, he still couldn't see. What happens when you lose your sight and you don't know whether you're ever going to get your sight back again? That will help you turn your life around. Yes, it will. When you think you done lost something forever, now you done think you done failed, and it's all over, and you're going to hell for all eternity. But God still was able to use Paul, changed his name, and he changed his ways. Woo. That's heavy right there. When Saul made it his business to destroy the church, going from door to door in Jerusalem, looking for people who followed after Jesus and throw them into prison just for being a Christian, killing them. Okay, and back then that's why he used to throw stones at the victims. The victims would actually be in a circle, and everybody in the whole town would, around you, so they couldn't run. And so they would just start throwing stones at you and hitting you in the head, wherever they could hit you in the head, and the victim would just eventually, become stunned and fall unconscious, and then they would die from the wounds in their head, the bleeding. Okay, and Paul just did it because he said Jesus is dead now, but when he found out that Jesus was still alive, he changed his life and turned his life around. He didn't know if he was going to get his sight back ever, but when he did get his sight back, he decided to devote his life to God. He converted, as found in Acts 9, 1 through 19. You can read it at your leisure. Yeah. Now the rewards of wisdom comes from Proverbs 3, 5 to 8 Amplified Version, which says, trust in and rely confidently on the Lord with all your heart. And do not rely on your own insight and understanding. In all your ways, know and acknowledge and recognize God, and he will make your path straight and smooth, removing obstacles that block your way. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord with reverence, awe, and obedience, and turn entirely away from evil. Okay, it will be health to your body and marrow to your bones, your sinews, your muscles, your nerves, all your inner parts, and refreshment, physical well-being to your bones. We can avoid a lot of mistakes the Assyrians made by being obedient to the word of God. It wasn't until many battles had been fought and the Assyrians lost their power that they converted to Christianity. It took devastation and ruin to lead them to Christ, as it does with many of us today. Some people today even thought that they may face devastation, destruction, and collapse, and they still don't turn to God. God gives us instructions in his word and tells us what we need to do so that we can defeat any health issue, any financial issue, any issue at all of thinking that we have failed. Why wait until you're on your sick bed of affliction and your doctor is giving you until tomorrow to live? Why wait until you're down to your last dollar and then you decide to get up and go look for a job? Why you wait until all hell breaks loose in your relationship and whatnot, or you get that dispossess notice, or you get a foreclosure letter? Now you're ready to take action. Don't wait until the last minute. Okay, if you have followed Jesus Christ all your life and you still feel that you have failed, what you're doing, you're suffering as a slave to righteousness, which means that you are God is pleased with your actions. Okay, if you are saved, if you have turned away from your wicked ways and your heart and your mind is right, and you still feel like you're failing and you're not succeeding, remember you got to be tested. Your mom and your daddy sinned, now you got to deal with the sin because you got to be tested. Okay, you have to be tempted. We have to go through the same thing that Jesus Christ went through. 39 lashes, baby, before you get any flashes of success. Okay, so I want to want you to holler at the sister. And I've been talking about my book, Valley of Dry Bones, Live Again. And that will conclude the 3-part series of Failure is Not Fatal.